Hey, welcome to the Horse Hour podcast. We're at the National Equine Forum today, and my guest right now is Roly Owers. He's the Chief Executive of World Horse Welfare, and we're talking about social licence. Welcome to the Horse Hour podcast. We're at the National Equine Forum, and we're joined by a previous guest. He's been on the podcast before. It's Roly Owers, who is the Chief Executive of World Horse Welfare. How are you, Roly?
I'm very well, Amy. It's lovely to speak to you again.
Oh, and to you. Now, you're speaking at the forum today with Barry Johnson. What are you guys going to be talking about?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to speaking today. It's around a session of sort of global issues which have sort of national and local interest. And the concept, or what we're talking about, is social licence. And is it something that is, I think people would recognise, is growing more and more, especially when you look at something like racing, but also all elite horse sport, where it can only operate where the general public gives it a social licence to operate. And that's a concept of foundations of which are to be doing the right things by our horses in terms of their health and welfare, but also then telling the public that we're doing the right things and explaining to them, you know, what's being done. And you can see issues like the whip in racing, which is a very emotive issue. And that potentially can be very damaging to racing because through its social licence, through its how public perceive racing, can be hugely damaging to it as a sport.
So I guess it's not a written form. It's not where we can sign up to a social licence. It's something where basically the community agrees that there are particular morals and ethos that we take to the industry. And we say, OK, well, you know, I own horses, so I expect all horses to be treated fairly, with respect, with love, care, and that they have all their needs for their health met. Is that the kind of thing you mean?
Yes, certainly. You're absolutely right. It's not a written thing. It's an unwritten sort of contract with society, but it's not about animal rights. It is about actually the public understanding that when we use horses for entertainment, which is what we're doing here, that we are doing all we can to protect their health and welfare. And that is something that is changing as society changes, and certainly with the evolution of social media, there is far more of a focus and an interest around animal welfare, and that's a really good thing. And the social licence is there to get horse sport to understand what they need to do to fulfil their side of the bargain, so to speak, so that horse sport in the future can flourish. I'm going to talk about the social licence in the round, to just introduce as a concept and sort of some practical examples, and we could come back to that if we had time. Barry was established as chairman of the Horse Welfare Board, which was something that British racing set up 18 months ago. And it came out of a debate in Parliament and from, I think, the autumn of 2018. And very much what came out of that, and racing recognised that they had to have some body which pull together all the various parts of racing and to pull together to have a unified welfare strategy. And so it's got racing stakeholders on it, but it's got two independent people, Tracy Crouch, who was previously Secretary of State for Cultural, Media and Sport, and Barry, who's a veterinary surgeon, previous chairman of World Horse Welfare, who is chairing that group, and they have recently announced their strategy, and he'll be talking about what that is all about and how it aims to fulfil racing's social licence.
Oh, it's such a great idea, Roly. Did you come up with this? It sounds like one of your ideas.
I'd love to say it came from Australia. Well, to be honest, this concept of a social licence is not new. It's been going for many years, and certainly in the late 90s, it was being used very much in the environmental field, where mining companies obviously have a great impact on, you know, sending people underground and sort of public safety, but also environmental challenges. So the concept of social licence there is quite well recognised. Actually, it's been more recognised from an animal welfare point of view in Australia, because many people will know that in Australia, greyhound racing has had a significant issue and challenge, and it's almost effectively been banned in Australia because the perception is that there was growing public concern around greyhound racing, and the industry didn't react to that. So it's a good example of where actually, if you ignore the social licence, it can have significant implications. But also, I just wanted to bring it into the here and now and the day to day, because if you think about horses on roads, and, we know through the British Horse Society campaign and many horrific stories that sometimes the road can be a very dangerous place for horse and rider. And there's no doubt that in that specific regard, drivers have got a commitment and an obligation, but so do riders. And it's just a simple thing of saying thank you to people who slow down on the road. It can have a profound effect going forward for drivers who are more understanding. So the whole social licence bit can be very much on the day-to-day as well as with elite sport.
And just from hearing you talk then, it almost seems that there's an element of this social licence from tradition and historic attitudes that actually are not helping the industry, like, people not wearing high vis because, well, it's something that I've done for ages. So yeah. The tradition that we find in the industry is that actually some of those are holding us back. So how do we change those mindsets to so that everybody's on the same new social license, which is for animal welfare and our own safety?
Absolutely. And we do live in the equine world is fairly well known for being a small c conservative sector where change isn't always sort of actively embraced. And I think the key aspect around the social license is to try and get people to understand that the world is changing, society is changing, and to a degree we have to change with it. And if we just look at the whole understanding of animal welfare, that is really changing too. And so many people would know about the 5 freedoms, which, from the 1960s, that have done so much to sort of improve animal welfare, especially farm animal welfare. But now we move on and talk about the 5 provisions. And that's as much about a horse's mental well-being as it is about its physical well-being. So we need to be challenging ourselves how we are managing our horses day to day, how we're training them, how we're riding them. Because actually our understanding of what makes a happy horse is changing all the time too.
Do you know, I'm so glad that you said that, because I'm hearing a big shift in a lot of riders, especially competition riders. I recently have been taking on some show jumping horses that notoriously would never get a break, and now they're on a 6-week break, 6-week routine holiday. So some go into work, they go competing, and then others are on holiday, and then they do a swap. And it's all about giving them the headspace that they need to recover and just be horses for a little bit. And what we're finding is that these horses are actually performing at a much better level when they go back into work, which I'm so thrilled about, because, they're in my care, and I think, gosh, I don't want them going back worse than when they arrived. But it's just great to hear that, we don't have to have these horses in boxes all the time, on the walker being ridden, being washed. They can actually, it's okay for them to be horses for a bit, and that's more beneficial to their health. And so it's lovely to hear top level riders taking this on board as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's, as our understanding grows, we just need to change. And we often talk about, or increasingly talk about, the 3 Fs of looking after horses, which is freedom, friendship and forage. We know horses, evolution-wise, they graze 17 hours a day. So it's really important they have ad lib or almost ad lib access to forage. They are a social species. So actually having friendship with other and time to interact with other horses is really important. And freedom, it's really important. Not all horses are the same. That's an important thing to get across. But most horses do need freedom. They need access to pasture on a daily basis. And that's a big challenge in some scenarios. I would totally accept that. But we've got to do all we can to improve the mental well-being and the physical well-being of our animals. And how we can do that is changing as our understanding of health and welfare changes too.
And have you seen a difference in this social licence then in the UK that have, through World Horse Welfare and changes in society that have impacted on the new kind of 2020 version of our industry?
Yes, I mean, I was at an event the other day which the Saddlers put on, and they talked about the importance of the social licence, because it's not obviously just the riders, it's the whole industry that goes around the equine sector. And as we know, the equine sector in the UK is worth £7 billion. It's a big, big business. But at the heart of it is the horse. And our obligation, obviously, is to protect and enhance the health and welfare of these animals. And more people are recognising that. So you're seeing more mention of it in the media. As you've talked, there is top riders now who are beginning to understand it. Certainly we're in discussion with the FEI, and they very much understand it. And as Barry will tell us, very much it is something that racing's beginning to get its head round too.
So what's the idea then, Roly? What would be your ultimate dream?
Oh, there's a good question. I mean, I think the ultimate dream here is to have an equine sector which fully understands what the social licence is about. And by talking about the equine sector, that is from very much the elite sport rider and elite racing across to your daily person who loves their horses and just uses them for or rides them or even has them as a companion animal. We want people to understand that we've all got a role to play in maintaining the social licence for the equine sector. And so we've all got to contribute to that. Clearly, some people are in a better position than others to be able to do that, but it is a collective responsibility, and no one can say that's for other people.
No, and absolutely, and people need to be accountable, especially if they're holding and looking after and caring for horses. There is a risk, though, that as we're seeing this shift, people are taking on great responsibility, but which is great. But equally, if they're seeing animals that are not being cared for, or horses or donkeys that are not getting the care to the standards that this social licence is hoping for, that actually they're then taking on those challenges themselves rather than going to the respected charities. And I recently spoke to Kirsty from RSPCA, and she talks about the multi-agency the agencies working together, multi-agency process, which is where you all work together with the BHS and you work with the RSPCA and Red Wings, and it's great. But what I was saying was that it's so painful for us, Roly, because we see these animals and we want things to be done, and we see the abuse and the social changes. Our morals are saying this isn't okay. These animals shouldn't be treated like this. We want to be accountable. We want to be responsible for it. But there's levels and limits of what we can actually do without causing more damage. And I think it's finding that fine line between we've got the passion and the underlying social license of love, but ultimately what do we do with it? You know, do we hand it to you or do we try and rescue these horses ourselves? And I think there's a fine line between how responsible we can be.
So there's two separate things there. I mean, the passion in which you give the question is brilliant. The social license isn't a standard, it's a balance. It's all about getting that balance right, because in many senses there is no ideal. Many people think horses at nature is the ideal, but actually nature is not a very kind person, and therefore we've got to get that balance right. So that's what social license is all about. What you've touched on and your discussion with Kirsty is equally relevant, because it's a great example where social media can be such a force for good, but also can bring huge challenges too, because we can understand and find out about situations far quicker now. But also when people see things going on with animals, which we completely understand are in far from ideal situations, they get very frustrated when they perceive nothing to be being done. And that is a great challenge for us, because almost in every case, I can give an assurance something is being done and we're trying to move a situation. And sometimes this can take a long, long time. The law is the law, and therefore we've got to try and work together. And so getting people who have the passion that you've just talked about to work with us is what we need to work towards, because actually rescuing these animals in many ways, notwithstanding the legal challenges of doing that, is the easy bit. It's it's then caring for them, rehabilitating them and rehoming them. And that is a big commitment. So we need to work together and try not to get frustrated when people don't think that rapid enough progress is being made.
Hearing you speak, I'm thinking about, this is what I love about the National Equine Forum, is I think back to 4 years ago when we first met, because you're on the board for the forum, aren't you?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm hearing we're looking at passports. There was a talk on passports a couple of years ago, and licenses for horses, and making sure that every horse in the UK has a passport, has a microchip number, and we know where they are and what they're doing. So all these little bits that are happening over the last few years have got to come to fruition soon to help monitor the breeding, how many horses there are, and then the welfare. We must be seeing a difference in the next 10 years, surely. An improvement from all the hard work that's been done over the last 4 and 5 years.
Oh, absolutely. And you could point to improvements already, but the reality is you've got to get these base systems right. And you pick up on equine identification in the central equine database, that there's been really good progress made on that, but there's still a bit of a way to go. And if we don't get the fundamentals right, then it's not going to work going forward. And the real challenge we have around passports is because they've been around for 15 years and people don't really understand what they are and why they need them and what the benefits are to them. And the fact that actually having a proper equine ID system is really important as a base to enhance and protect equine health and welfare. But you're right. I mean, if we get this right, there will be significant benefits to the sector. But as I say, there's still a few things to iron out there.
Well, thank you for everything that you do as Chief Exec of Welsh Horse Welfare. I'm a massive super fan of the charity, I am, and of the forum as well. And so thank you for coming onto the podcast to talk to us again. And I guess we'll catch up next year when we find out what you're talking about next year. We can watch your talk with Barry Johnson at the National Equine Forum if you head to their website, nationalequineforum.com, and I think it's on YouTube as well. Thank you so much, Roly.
Amy, thank you so much. Lovely to speak to you.
Thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can hear more podcasts from the National Equine Forum at their website, nationalequineforum.com. I speak to Abigail Turnbull from Richmond Equestrian Centre, who talks about how they survived strangles. I talk to Zach from the Behavioural Insights team on how he can change behaviour in the industry, and David Rendell, who talks about worming resistance. And you can see the live streams of every guest speaker at the National Equine Forum website. I'll speak to you soon.